This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Hello, everybody. It's me, Tom. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Just a little message to share with you, and this is happening after we've recorded the chat of this week's podcast. A message from our dear friend Emerald. Unfortunately, she can't join us on the show this week because, quite sadly, very suddenly, she lost her mother this week. It is very sad news. Our hearts and souls and solidarity are with Emerald in this very difficult time. She's surrounded by lots of people who love her, and we know she's going to be okay. But she sends her apologies. She did read Jack Toohey's book. She wants you to know that, and was looking forward to discussing it with him. She also looking forward to discuss the Bob Catter reading his own biography moment. But that's not going to happen. Obviously, we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But yes, our thoughts and love are with Emerald in this difficult time. And we've got a fantastic episode and conversation with Jack Toohey for you for this week. So let's do it.
Taylor Swift is engaged. Taylor Swift is engaged. Taylor Swift is engaged. This is a very exciting moment for me in my professional career because I get to announce that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are engaged.
All right, Jack, I'm sorry to do this to you, but would you please describe the meme that I texted to you mere minutes ago?
All right, so we have Ali France MP, Swifties and the first-time homebuyers rejoice, Labour and Travis delivering. And it has over the top of Travis Kelce, first home buyers and looking lovingly, forehead touching Taylor Swift with 5% deposits over her. So it's just a delightful meme.
First of all, congratulations to Travis and Tay-Tay, and we wish them all the best. And I know if Emerald was here, she would share those sentiments very much. I'm sure she's very excited. Well, I don't know how she feels about Travis. But anyway, she loves Taylor. So everyone's talking about this. Labour MP Ali France getting on board and said, you know what will speak to the youth is to ride this Tay-Tay wave and also celebrate the announcement of the Labour government's expansion of their 5% home deposit scheme to get more people into the unaffordable, fucked housing market and drive up house prices even further. I saw you do a post about how this thing's a scam. I mean, we've talked about it once or twice on the show, but like, how cooked is this idea of letting people get into massively debt with even less money of a deposit? And how is it not going to help the housing crisis in Australia?
Well, I think this is the powerful thing about it. On face value, it goes, oh, cool, now I can get into the housing market. Like a lot of young people are probably thinking that and maybe would see a post where I'm calling it a scam and be like, wait, that doesn't make sense to me because I just want to get my foot in the door. But I think ultimately, you know, the likelihood is that you're taking on massive amounts of debt that you're probably not going to necessarily be able to service. If you're taking on 5%, like it's going to be a 40-year loan term or something. Like, what is that going to be? You're more than likely going to be buying property from property investors who now are able to bump the price up because more people have more money to invest in the housing market. And then they're going to be then taking that money, taking their capital gains discount profits and reinvesting in the property market because they're not just going to leave it. And therefore flushing more money into the already super inflated housing market. So it is a scam. It basically just launders money from millennials and Gen Z that are just trying to get their foot in the door and rightfully are excited that maybe they have this potential to get in the housing market. It still remains to be seen how many people actually will have the opportunity to get these 5% loans.
Yeah.
And ultimately just making the housing market even more inflated than it already is. So yeah, it's a
Which
scam.
the government has admitted. This isn't a crazy green left conspiracy theory. The government has said, yes, this will have a modest impact in driving up house prices.
They said that on Triple J.
Subsidizing demand. They said, yeah, guys, don't worry. We're getting you into the debt trap with houses that are already way too more expensive. We're going to make them more expensive. And as you say, I think someone said the website Housing Australia crashed or whatever with this surge of interest. And you get it. Yeah, I completely understand why people who are so desperate to get into the market would take advantage of anything at all. But that's not a way to address the fucking problem. And how dare they bring Tay-Tay and Travis and their love into this?
Exactly. Also, the other thing that needs to be said here is that ultimately, like, it's the taxpayers that are guaranteeing these loans. If they're bad loans, like it's young people that are getting themselves into these massive amounts of debt and they default on these loans, then it's us that carry the burden of that, which So now we're putting renters that aren't even in the housing market as taxpayers footing the bill potentially for bad loans.
Your taxes are going to increase the price of houses during a housing crisis. Fantastic stuff. Fantastic stuff.
It's incredible, really.
If you need a hand negotiating with fundamentalists, I am available. I'm in coalition with the National Party. And if you think the Israelis and Palestinian struggles get on, let me tell you about the New South Wales division of the Liberal Party.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
All right, hello everybody. It's Serious Danger. It's a podcast about green politics in Australia. This is not an official Greens political party podcast. It's produced by Michael the Griffin. Tom Ballard here, coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people in Naarm. The lovely Emerald Moon is away this week. I am joined as a guest co-host, returning champion, Jack Toohey. Hello, mate.
Hello. It's good to be back.
Great to have you back. Great to talk about your new book, which is coming out, Better Things Are Possible, How Rebellious Hope Will Change the World. Here we go. I'm going to read the bio from the book. This will embarrass you. Jack Toohey is an Australian creative director and activist known for his ability to distill complex issues into clear, compelling content. He rose to prominence in 2023 with a viral video examining the differences between housing affordability in 1983 compared with 2023, which amassed over 20 million views. A former music photographer, creative agency founder, Jack has redirected his communication skills towards storytelling that exposes harmful systems and advocates for social and climate justice.
Yeah, that line's really going to piss people off. The former music photographer. What right does he have to write a book?
Who the fuck
like
is this?
Well, he's shot some gigs and now he's writing a book. How dare he?
Well, I enjoyed the book. I didn't read all of it, to be fair, because I'm very busy being a millennial comedian. But no, there's so much to talk about it. Excited to discuss that with you. Last time you were on the show, you were on the week that we sort of found out about the way that algorithms were going to be fucking over political content.
Mm-hmm.
How's that all going? How is your social media presence? Has that made a massive impact on the kind of work that you're putting out there online?
Well, I think at the start of this year, not weeks before the inauguration of one Donald Trump, or maybe just after, they repealed all those things. They said Meta is actually a great place to have political discussion.
Oh,
so
great.
In the year that there was the most democracy ever happening in human history, where the most people were voting ever were happening, that year leading up, they effectively banned political content. And as soon as their favored king was anointed, they said, "Oh, you can talk about politics again." So that's not to say that I'm experiencing a boost in the algorithm. Absolutely not. Especially talking about, Palestine. But I think that, they kind of really show their hand with that in there.
Big time. A quick shout out to our patrons for supporting the show. We love you very much. Thank you for helping us make this show possible. Thank you to Olivia, Gulam, and Koshin for signing up this week. You can go to patreon.com/seriousdangerau. For just $3 a month, you get sweet bonus content. Bit of a teaser for upcoming bonus content. If you listened to last week's weekly show, you will have seen us talking to Dr. Richard Dennis, who features in the new book from Jack Toohey, Better Things Are Possible. We talked about the Economic Roundtable and all the thrills and spills of that, but we also recorded a chat about his new essay about centrism, which was so far up our alley, I can't even express to you. That conversation is coming down the pipeline. If you want to listen to it, all you need to do is become a patron, patreon.com/seriousdangerau.
When US forces invaded Iraq, Australian troops were right behind.
We are determined to join other countries to deprive Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
Opponents of the war accused the government of exaggerating the threat and say the Chilcot report is now vindication.
We know this now more clearly than ever, that the Howard government took us to war on a lie.
Andrew Wilkie resigned at the time from the Office of National Assessments in direct protest at the decision to send Australia to war. He now blames John Howard for the terror threat Australia faces today, including attacks like the Lindt Cafe siege.
Not only did it turbocharge Al-Qaeda back then, but it created the circumstances for the rise of Islamic State.
I mean, this is irrational.
John Howard still stands by the decision to join the US-led coalition and says it was based on the best intelligence at the time.
There was no lie. There were errors in intelligence, but there was no lie.
All right, we will get to the book, I promise. But first of all, I had to pick your brain about this crazy, crazy story that has been developing this week, this bombshell about Iran. If you forgot to be scared of Iran, anybody, don't worry. We've got some new information to make you terrified at night and distract you from anything else that might be happening in the world. Bit of a disclaimer, we will say we're recording this on Thursday morning this week, which is a bit earlier than normal. So, I don't know, by the time people hear this, maybe the false flag will be exposed or we will have been invaded. I don't fucking know. But let's just summarize this. I'm sure people are across the basic details. But on Tuesday, Australia expelled the Iranian ambassador and 3 Iranian embassy officials after ASIO announced they had credible intelligence. Once again, a phrase that really raises a lot of red flags, but there you go. Credible intelligence that Iranian proxies were behind the anti-Semitic arson attacks on Melbourne's Adass Israel synagogue and Lewis's Continental Kitchen in Bondi in Sydney. That's a kosher deli, I believe. Fugitive Melbourne alleged crime boss Kazem Hamad has been accused of conspiring with Iranian spies to carry out the firebombing of the synagogue last December. ASIO head Mike Burgess says organised crime figures were hired in a web of cutouts and used as agents of Iran to terrorise Australia's Jewish community, subcontracted to criminal gangs. This is the only expulsion of an ambassador that Australia has made since World War II, which is pretty extraordinary. And they've announced that Australia will join the US and Canada in listing Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organisation. Iran has denied these allegations. An official said, it appears that this action against Iran, effectively an assault on diplomacy and the relationship between the two nations, is being used to offset the modest criticism Australia has recently directed at the Zionist regime. Israel has celebrated this news, said, yes, it's a win, and that Australia has only made this action after Benjamin Netanyahu called out Anthony Albanese's recognition of Palestine. A whole bunch of people across the media have lost their goddamn fucking minds. It's very hard to get a grip on exactly what we do and don't know and what it all means. But Jack, what was your initial reaction to seeing this story?
My initial reaction was, oh, that's weird.
Case closed.
and then it quickly turned to like much deeper suspicion and then anger. I think after like so many, like 300,000 or more march across the country on Sunday, and just days after that, one of our core demands was to expel the Israeli, ambassador. And just days after that, for them to show how easy it is to apparently do that just for Iran is really frustrating. I think then the whole story, as you pointed out, just, days after Netanyahu's given Albanese an ultimatum to show that he's doing something about anti-Semitism before the Jewish New Year. The timing of it just stinks. If they've known about this, because I remember they were alluding to this idea that organized crime were involved in these attacks, at the time. But that didn't change the fact that they've changed the laws about protesting, and they've been saying that anti-Semitism is on the rise. I would say that this attack is an anti-Semitic attack, regardless of who did it. But this proves that it's not necessarily like a social cohesion thing if it was an organized crime. Also, the fact that Israeli intelligence seems to be involved in giving this intelligence to ASIO makes it really, really stink. So I don't know. If it is a false flag, then I said yesterday that like Albo's prime ministership is untenable because he is being influenced by a foreign power to make a decision based on, we don't know what information.
The mental gymnastics going on here is crazy. I mean, I was listening to Lane Street Pod this week too, and Osman, friend of the show, made, the very good point that, okay, if this is true, if the Iranian government was behind these attacks, then all the people who are saying the attacks are clear examples of the anti-Semitism crisis gripping this country were being very silly. Again, that doesn't diminish the seriousness or the presence of anti-Semitism in our society, but the clear agenda to both link these attacks to the sentiments of the pro-Palestine movements and the marches every single week, and the idea that this somehow proves is even more evidence of an anti-Semitism crisis gripping Australians at Australia, when in fact these attacks were apparently the will and the actions of a foreign government. Those two things cannot both be true. They're completely contradictory.
And who don't benefit from that rhetoric in Australia in any way, like over in Iran, like why do they care about Australia? But also from the perspective of being like anti-Israel, ultimately this has led to better protections for Israel and dissent in Australia towards Israel, which helps their genocide. So I don't see what the motive could be for Iran other than just being shit stirrers, but it seems like not a really good motive, I don't think.
We should also, I mean, yes, look, Iran is certainly has a history of shit stirring. I think that's totally fair enough. And, you can simultaneously condemn a whole bunch of what the Iranian regime stands for and the actions in the world while still raising legitimate questions, particularly where there, still seems to be huge gaps in our knowledge. I mean, to complicate things maybe a little bit for the sake of our audience, the Greens' response was to support the listing of the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Apparently the Greens have been calling on the government to do that for a very long time, in solidarity with the Iranian diaspora, according to a media release that we got from the party this week. And David Shoebridge says, these steps are appropriate given the reported actions of the Iranian regime. They follow from effective action by the authorities to investigate and understand the cause of anti-Semitic attacks. The Greens have also called for the government to support the United Nations General Assembly, the implementation of the recommendations of the UN Special Rapporteur on Iran, and the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances. So, and that press release was titled Sanctions on the Iranian Regime. Now, again, I don't confess to know all the ins and outs of what that particular UN resolution is about. My understanding is that the Iranian regime has huge amounts of sanctions placed on it, particularly by the US. Often they are crippling and are often, that was a big part of the negotiation around the nuclear deal that Obama negotiated that Trump then rescinded, was about trying to ease some of those pretty intense economic sanctions. Sanctions which, you would argue only sort of build up the idea that Iranian people do not like America because they're being pretty brutal to them while they're suffering under those. But anyway, that was the Greens' particular position in response to this. Then, you've got a few folks sort of saying what's going on here, raising a few questions. Patron Mitchell got in touch with the show asking about this story. Is this manufacturing consent? I asked the question on the Reddit forum, Australian Left Politics, and got abused. So I thought I'd ask some actual lefties on the matter. This is giving WMD vibes. Is there Iran war imminent? Maybe, do you want to speak to that a little bit more, Jack, about the kind of the red flags or the suspicions that get raised around this?
Yeah, I mean, I think someone was replying to me yesterday on Threads and saying, I think I'm going to trust the word of ASIO over, some whatever. But they were
former music photographer.
Exactly, yeah. But they were involved in manufacturing consent for the WMD stuff, in the early 2000s. So it's not we can't just blindly trust our institutions. And I think what this has kind of highlighted is how unwilling the media is to ask any of these questions, and it's left to kind of music photographers to ask why
and comedians
and comedians. This doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And I just think also just quickly on the hypocrisy of this action, if I don't think that Iran are angels by any stretch, but I think that I would like consistency in our diplomacy. And I think that when Israel killed an Australian aid worker in a marked vehicle, when they had been supplied with the coordinates of this aid convoy, I think that would have been a pretty good time to have expelled the Israeli ambassador because they committed a war crime against an Australian citizen. But for some reason, that's not part of the conversation. It's barely been litigated since the day or the days after. And I'm an author. I know words. And so I just think that we have to ask these questions, and some people will say we're siding with, these terrible and terrorist regimes. But ultimately, we do have to ask the questions because we are being left to do that because our media is not, providing that fourth estate.
No. The Australian media will just be like, yes, ASIO is a non-political, non-partisan organisation who just provide information and keep us all safe. Like that is like seriously the level, and excluding notable exceptions like Declassified Australia and journalists who make it their business to take on the national security state and ask these questions and have a memory that, yes, dates back to the horrors of the War on Terror and beyond, further back into our history, and sort of seeing how these organizations work, and that any information from any government anywhere should be treated with suspicion and needs to be verified. And ASIO can put this big cover on everything and say, we don't reveal our sources, we can't do this, and we can't even tell you who else helped us with this information. I mean, Albanese gave an interview to 730 and said the findings are primarily ASIO's investigation. It was primarily Australian, but we still don't know if there was a partner involved whatsoever, which, of course, people lead to think that this isn't fully conspiratorial, sort of saying, well, what about Mossad? Israel as a intelligence agency, which we know operates in lots of other countries, and it's fair to say that they would benefit from this information getting out there and being acted upon, clearly, as we see Israel celebrating now.
And there is Israeli reporting saying that they were involved in uncovering this. So it's not Australian reporting. They haven't connected that tissue, but Israel is claiming in their media that they were involved in this. So again, we have to really question why they were involved. This is a country that has recently attacked Iran and almost got the world into a fucking World War III.
Remember how we all forgot about that? That was crazy. That just happened. Australia supported it. Complete contravention of international law. Anyway, moving on.
The zone is well and truly overflowing with shit. It hasn't been flooded. It's overflowing now, and we just can't keep up.
And just on ASIO's credibility, if you want to treat yourself to a good read, just go to the Wikipedia article for ASIO. Just in the controversies and criticism section, you'll have a lot of fun. I didn't know about this. The anti-terrorism bungle in 2001. A few weeks after the 11th of September 2001 on the United States, mistakes led ASIO to incorrectly raid the home of Bilal Day and his wife. It has been revealed that the search warrant was for a different address. The couple subsequently sought damages, and the embarrassing incident was settled out of court in late 2005, 4 years, with all material relating to the case being declared strictly confidential. So this is the commitment to justice, to keeping people safe, and transparency that we've come to expect from our security agencies. And the big whoopsie, as you mentioned, both ASIO and the Office of National Assessment found that it was highly likely that Iraq possessed chemical and biological weapons, which was the whole premise for the 2003 invasion, which was illegal and, by some estimates, led to the deaths of 1 million people. Four Australian soldiers, I believe, were killed in the Iraq War as well. So being skeptical is totally fine. And if you just take everything our security agencies tell us on face value, then, yeah, you're a bit of a rube. Double standard's a good point too. David Shoebridge also saying there is a deep inconsistency with the government taking these measures against Iran and failing to take similar steps against other countries when they grossly breach international law, not least Israel. I mean, yes, if we go to the scoreboard, it's Iran, when it comes to genocides, Iran 0, Israel 1. So I think we should keep that in mind. And if that isn't the basis for expelling an ambassador, implementing sanctions, ending diplomatic ties, what is? And, sorry, I know I'm just ranting here now, but on the double standard fact, the idea that foreign interference is like this horrific crime and Australia was just, sitting around minding our own business and we never interfere with any other countries is absolute fucking bullshit. The idea that Israel doesn't interfere in other countries, including supporting the South African apartheid regime, or Argentina, even when they had a very anti-Semitic regime in power, Israel was fully backing them in and supplying them with weapons. That happens all the time. And it just drives me crazy whenever Western countries are always acting like, oh, they interfered with us. They got involved in our country. Can you imagine such a thing? We would never.
Except we did it in Timor.
Yep.
And there's lots of, and we're supporting America and constantly destabilizing sovereign states. So
yes, look up the old CIA and their history on interfering with democratic elections, please. Anyway, all this is not to say that those attacks were horrific. That Iran has, yes, absolutely involved, had operations around the world, mainly targeting dissidents and critics of the regime. That is bad. I'm somewhat ambivalent, or I'm, would like to know more about the position as to severing diplomatic ties and listing the IGRC as a terrorist organization. I guess my main response is like, okay, if you want to do that, fine. But the moral certitude, the supposed moral standard that you're applying here is completely exposed as fraudulent if you do not take the same actions against Israel, a state that is currently committing a genocide before our very eyes.
Yeah, and ultimately, my heart does go out to Jewish Australians that have experienced these kind of escalating attacks within Australia. Like I said before, they are anti-Semitic, regardless of who does it. The methodology and like the motive behind that anti-Semitism ranges like wildly. And I think ultimately it still just makes for a less comfortable experience of Australian life when there's always the chance of these things happening. So absolutely, we should be getting to the bottom of how these attacks were able to happen and what was behind it. But I think that the government and ASIO owe all Australians, especially Jewish Australians, the motive and the reasoning behind this stuff, rather than just saying, yeah, it all kind of makes sense and just trust us, bro. Like it doesn't, that's not helping anti-Semitism in this country, and it's not helping social cohesion, which they love to talk about. And ultimately it's just helping Israel. That is who it's all it's helping. And that means that more people will die.
Just on the marches, I went along to the march last weekend in Nam. It was fucking amazing. Estimates of 100,000. At one point, the ABC, hundreds of people have gathered outside the State Library when it was shitloads more than that. But it was an incredible day, beautiful weather, and a huge outpouring of support and solidarity, and a very brave stand against genocide and calling on our government to do something about it. I know you went along in Sydney, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
I stood for 40 minutes at Town Hall to film a time lapse, thinking that it might take 10 minutes for the crowd to pass me, or 20 minutes. And then it was 30 minutes, or 40 minutes, going down the whole kind of, what's it called? We don't call them trams, light rail tracks down the middle of George Street. I don't know how to crowd count that, but it was a lot of people. It was certainly not like that the Harbour Bridge was kind of like this high point, and the movement now has kind of died down. Absolutely, the momentum is growing.
Yeah. Would you say the reporting was pretty muted across the border? For a little bit of stuff of, lots of people getting out on the street, but almost no response from political figures, or certainly didn't get the same level of attention as the Harbour Bridge March, I suppose, and the kind of national nature of it. And, further to that, it seems to me like they weren't able to pick out inflammatory or controversial actions in any of these marches. It was all just so wholesome and standard that the media couldn't beat it up into, look at all these terrorists.
It's really hard when you go to film these protests and you see just like hundreds of prams getting pushed down the street, and to try and turn that into something really dark and evil and scary, when it's just like kids sitting in their pram being like, yeah, this is cool. So I think the media definitely did not report about it as much as they should have and could have, considering the scale across the country. Like I saw people at the entrance in the Central Coast, like a good contingent of people there, and in regional and rural parts of Australia as well. So this is not, again, confined to inner city Melbourne and latte hipsters. Like this is extended far beyond the core demographics that the media like to pretend that all protesters are. So they can't continue to ignore it. But the problem is that we will have to continue to sustain pressure, and that means devoting a couple of hours on a Sunday every week to show up to these protests. If that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. I know tomorrow you'll find better things. I know tomorrow you'll find better things.
All right, better things are possible. How rebellious hope will change the world. Now, Jack Toohey, I went to a centrist rally and I listened to the people in the Australian Labor political party, and they tell me that better things aren't possible. So why the fuck would you write a book about how they are possible? What the hell are you thinking?
Well, it just turns out if you just scratch a little bit beneath the surface, it turns out they are.
Oh, what?
It's just under a thin layer. You can just scratch it and you're like, oh, wait, we can have like affordable housing, and we already had affordable housing in this country in the past just by investing in public housing and not treating it like an investment class. Crazy.
Well, hang on. That's an argument for better things were possible. That's For the boomers, better things are possible for the boomers, but we're fucked now, no?
I don't think that we're fucked completely. My pendulum swings between hope and despair. I think the pendulum, if that's possible, hangs more on the hope side of things. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written this book.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I'm banging my head against the table or screaming into the void a lot when you hear these kind of centrist takes and people telling me that we have to go slowly and we can't piss off the investors because that will be really damaging, or, you know, we rely on the gas industry so much so we can't really, you know, make royalties anymore or tax them properly. You know, it's just like, we got to go slowly. We took negative gear into the election. We can't do it again.
Oh, God. You run this country, Labor. You have a majority in everywhere. We're a one-party state. You can do it now.
A huge majority, and with like a limp dick opposition that has no chance of like getting their shit together in the next this term. And I would be surprised even they can do it in 6 years. Like, they're so fractured within the Liberal Party is fractured. The National Party is fractured with the Liberal Party. There's fracturing within the National Party. Like, there's so many different directions they're trying to go. I can't see how they're going to come together with a clear agenda for an election. That said, what did Labor bring to the election? I don't really remember any policies that they brought. So I guess you can win elections without having a clear goal.
Well, they had the 5% home deposit thing that we discussed, and that was good, and Taylor Swift likes it. So the book is divided into 4 big sections, and it's great, by the way, and particularly for people who like this podcast and these kind of politics, it's well worth getting into. We're talking about housing and the economy, mental health and gender, climate change and land, and media and politics. There's a lot of sort of explainers, you know, maybe going over material that folks who listen to this might be across, stuff that we talk about on the show all the time. You've got interviews with very cool people, including Max Chandler Mather and Adam Band. You also talk to some people from Labor, but, you know, no book's perfect. And you are, yes, I think, summarising and explaining how things are fucked in Australia, why they happen to be fucked, and what we can do about it. And I guess my first question to you is, did you read my book? Because I covered all this.
Yeah, no, I've got it over here. It's just sitting here.
You fuck. There was one point where I felt personally attacked. Every minute spent boomer bashing or debating the economies of avocado toast is another minute that adds millions to the housing market. I mean, I wrote some really funny jokes bashing boomers and talking about avocado. You didn't like that?
I thought you were going to say that you already said that. I'm like, oh, fuck. I've stolen this bit that I'm going to be running with in my media tour. Shit,
no,
dude.
That's a great bit. I mean, you sort of say you did the maths, and that like literally adding millions of dollars to the housing market every minute. You reckon? Like, you're seriously
every minute? Literally, it works out. For over the last decade, a minute was added to the housing market $1 million was added to the housing market every minute. And this decade will be faster than that. It will be more than $1 million this decade for sure, on current trajectory. So, but for now, we can just call it that. It's nice and clear.
Yes. No, God, every minute, millions of dollars added to this thing. Because the current value of the Australian housing market is 11 trillion, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's heaps. And then you have these moments where you're like, yes, if current trends continue, if house prices keep going up the way they have in the past, you know, your average house today is going to be what? $15 million or something worth in that kind of realm in 30 years.
Yeah, something like that. I think like if you track the growth over the last 40 years, it's an exponential curve, and therefore it's only going to accelerate further and further. At some point it has to, that seems impossible that it can continue like this way. Like something has to change. And I make the argument, like, is it better that we do like a kind of planned slowing and hopeful reversal of house prices in a way that actually like provides for people that will end up in negative equity and stuff? Or do we want to just crash the whole market and then just have these billionaires buy up all the housing market for like pennies on the dollar? So yeah.
As someone with a mortgage, I'd like it to be done in a nice way, please.
Well, this is why the housing is a Ponzi scheme, right? Like everyone, and like again, like as I was saying, you know, earlier, like we can't begrudge anyone trying to get into the housing market to have a safe place to live. Unfortunately, they become like the next kind of the pegs down that are now the first line of defense against the property investors, because we don't want people to be in negative equity. That's really bad. And again, it becomes taxpayers that probably have to bail that out if that negative equity out if that happens. So I don't know. I think that we need to, at the very least, stop the inflation of house prices and wait 30 or 40 years for wages to catch up. Like that's the only real fair way where no one loses.
Right. Which once again the Labor Party cannot do, and that's at the heart of that 5% home deposit policy, right? Like house prices need to keep going up. I think Rose Jackson, who you do talk to in the book on Q&A, quite famously asked, "Do you want house prices to go up or down?" And she said, "I think we need to slow the growth in increasing house prices." That's sort of as far as you'll get, I think, with the Labor MP.
But slowing growth is still growth.
Still growth.
So yeah, it's kind of like the same as that. Just to jump around a bit, it's the same idea as they have behind climate change and like our emissions. Like slowing our emissions is still more emissions. It's still more CO2 and methane in our atmosphere, warming the planet and taking us to tipping points. I would say that there's probably a tipping point on housing as well, and maybe they'll be at the same time, and it'll all work out.
We'll all just move into shelters to save ourselves from the climate crisis. So it'll be fine. All right. Well, as I say, people should check out the book, and you can go into these sort of like, the granular details of a lot of policy stuff, which is really fascinating. And there are, again, even with my experience of researching and writing a book and talking about this on the podcast, there was still a bunch of moments where I was like, fuck me, that is a deeply depressing statistic, or I haven't thought about it that way. So well worth it for that. But in terms of big picture ideas in the book, as you mentioned, hope is kind of crucial to it, particularly this idea that you mentioned in the intro of hope punk. Can you maybe explain to us what hope punk is and how you think about it?
I think like broadly around the world, but particularly in Australian culture over the last, it's probably always been pervasive in Australian culture, but particularly in our generations, there's been this cultivated numbness. It's kind of cool not to care about things. Caring is really cringe. And so that's the kind of prevailing culture. Then being hopeful and believing things can be better, saying better things are possible, and putting yourself out there to try and offer an alternative is cringe. That's what people think of, but really it's countercultural. So I'm trying to rebrand it, or I didn't come up with a term, but rebrand this as a punk thing. Like it's cool to care. And I can picture that on a t-shirt with like a cute little daisy on or something, but like we
stay in school, kids. It's cool to care.
The reason why things have gotten so bad is because a lot of Australians have abdicated their responsibility to be active participants within society and the political realm. And so a lot of people just go, I don't care, I'm at the pub, I just want to think about the footy. Think about the footy, but also think about the fact that like there are, policymakers are listening to lobbyists and not the people at the pub. And therefore, every minute that you spend not being involved in the conversation, the housing market goes up by $1 million, but also you concentrate power more and more. And so I think that like if we can actually shake off that apathy, believe that things can be better, and do that on a widespread national scale, then we can actually change things, and things will change quite quickly. But it's just the people in the center, or the people that just don't think that we can fix anything, that ultimately just make things worse. And that might be like a bitter pill for people to swallow. Like, I'm not making things worse. I'm not involved in it. Like, no, you are in the way. You are in the way of progress.
Well, but would it be fair to say that apathy you're talking about didn't come out of nowhere? It's not like everybody decided to be apathetic one day, right? Like to me, that apathy, that cynicism about our political system is rooted in a pretty consistent body of evidence, which is that, as you say, our political systems often don't work for the interests of ordinary people, and so in a way, it's not an unreasonable position to take to look at the state of things and sort of say it really doesn't seem like what I care about and my preferences sort of influence things massively. I have to focus on my family. I have to focus on work so that I can pay my rent or that I can pay my mortgage. Keeping up with ordinary life is tough enough, and I don't have the time or capacity to invest massively into politics or organizing when it's hard a lot of the time to see it lead to a lot of change or really make much of a difference.
I'm not necessarily asking people to do much more than believe that better things are possible. I think that is a really just this little thing that we can change in our minds, and that means that when people do come along, I do think that everyone is kind of waiting for some hero to come and save us, and everything's going to sort out. And I've definitely felt that just when my housing crisis video went viral, that people were just kind of like, "Oh, cool, he's going to fix the housing market." I'm like, no, I'm one dude. It takes all of us.
It is annoying that you didn't do that though.
Yeah, I know it is. I'm sorry, but you had a mortgage that I didn't want to get you in trouble with. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's my payment for not having read your book. No, but I think ultimately we just all think that things are just going to work out, and without working for it, or we think that things are going to work out because we think that someone else is going to do the work for us.
Right.
But we also at the same time don't believe that better things are possible. And I think we have to believe that better things are possible and believe that it takes work. And maybe it's not organizing every day and going to protest every weekend, or I think it's just joining community groups or having conversations at the pub with your mates about how the housing market is fucked, and challenging these notions that supply and demand, if we just make more supply, then house prices will go down. When the evidence does not support that, the evidence, is that there's a exponential growth and a concentration in the hands of fewer and fewer people. We have to have those conversations with our mates, even whether it's even just colloquially, but most people just don't even want to talk about it. I would obviously people listening to this podcast aren't those people. I think that everyone listening to this podcast will understand the frustration of going to the pub and sitting with your mates that are apathetic and don't believe that anything can change. And that's the point. That's the point that we need to target. If everyone that believes that better things are possible, and I hope my book helps more people believe that, then you have those conversations with your mates, and that's, the ripple effect. And I think that's a real problem in a society, is that we just go, no worries, she'll be right. No.
You're right. Hope is a sense, an anticipation that better things are possible or even likely in the future. And I think this is good. You differentiate between that and wishful thinking, which is kind of touching on what you were just saying there. Wishful thinking is, gee, I hope everything gets better. Someone will come along and figure out and change it. And let's just wait and see what happens when you're sort of challenging people to say, nope, getting people doing stuff is the only thing that kind of ever changes stuff. And even then it can be really hard because there are massive forces arrayed against us. But without that, then you're truly fucked. Then you can be certain of failure, I suppose. But I thought it was interesting too about the idea of, people think better things aren't possible. The idea of the future, I think it was maybe Adam Curtis, I don't know if you've seen his latest documentary, or he sort of talks about no one believes in the future anymore. And this is the idea. This is the big narrative around millennials and boomers, right? The narrative is always run that the kids will have a better life than what their parents had. And the result of neoliberal capitalism and the raw deal that millennials have been given in the 21st century is the thing that kind of upset all that. Well, no, we aren't. Because of deteriorating material economic conditions, millennials and Zoomers cannot be guaranteed that at all. In fact, jobs are shittier. The housing crisis is coming to a point we can't afford a house, and of course the planet is on fire. But it's interesting the political capitalization of that. I remember Tim Wilson was always tweeting #the future is going to be awesome, and there's this kind of right wing free market, techno futurist, techno optimism vibe, which sort of says everything's going to be great because the free market is developing all this awesome technology that's going to make our lives better. And I think you're totally right. The left needs to win back the idea of a better future, a positive vision for the future, because otherwise we're just talking about dystopia all the time, or it's left to the right and free market absolutists who think that innovation's going to save us from everything.
Yeah, I think that I would much rather the media write about my book or about leftist takes in general, saying that we are trying to have this utopia. We're trying to, or we want everyone to have, 4-day, like we were talking about this last week on the podcast, like the 4-day work week. Like this idea that we can have more time to like invest in the community and spend time in nature and stuff. Like, I think that that's what we should be trying to sell, is a utopian vision. And maybe we shoot for the stars, we land on the moon, not just like giving this idea that like everything is fucked. The climate is going to start collapsing in our lifetime. Like, that's almost a guaranteed fact. But we can still carve a good life through that collapse, and we can still have time to preserve as much of it as possible. And so I think that we have to, really build this vision. And that's why I end the book in 2050. And it isn't just like making shit up. It's looking at what's around us and what's available to us now, and the ideas that exist and the technology that exists today, to go, well, like, we can have an energy system that is way more individual, and each house has batteries and solar and generates its own power. That gives us less money to have to give to AGL and to these Origin Energy or whatever. And like, there's just like all these little pieces of technology that will become cheaper and cheaper and more easily accessible, that will undoubtedly benefit our daily lives. We just need to put all of them together and show like, this is what the future could be, and really sell that idea to centrists and even people in the right wing that don't believe that climate change is a problem. They don't believe that climate's going to collapse. They don't think anything's, but they could probably get around these ideas of like having more like freedom with our own energy. And like, I don't know, I think most people could get around a 4-day work week or a 3-day work week. I think there's lots of good things in the future, like the technology of bringing us. And it's too easy. It's too easy to fall into the trap of like, AI is going to kill us all. Climate's going to kill us all. And the housing market's going to collapse and we're all going to be homeless. Like the houses, as Richard Dennis says, like the houses are fine. They're here. The houses are not literally going to collapse unless there is, significant climate disasters, which is also likely in the future. So,
or we deregulate the construction industry and they,
they are going to collapse. That's Labor's policy, is that they're going to collapse.
Oh, Christ. Let's talk about some of the bigger ideological questions you're talking about. I mean, particularly in that first chapter when you talk about housing and the economy and economic inequality. You write, too often political debate devolves into unproductive name-calling and ideological finger-pointing, which we love to do here at Serious Danger, as if our only two choices are capitalism or communism, the free market or the state. But economic systems are not static. Every economic system has evolved, mutated, and been reshaped by those in power. And the thing you kind of land on is this thing that you've called the economy. What is the economy? Did you come up with that? I can't tell if I love it or I hate it.
I think that I hate it. I think the idea is just that I feel like we need to put labels on things.
Of course.
And so that's just what I came up with at the time, and I just stuck with it. None of my, no one at my publisher told me it was too lame to publish, so there it is in print. But it's basically just this idea that I think that so much of like the political discourse now is like just labeling everyone a socialist or a communist or a capitalist or a neoliberal. And I think that those titles can be kind of useful sometimes, but ultimately these are political and economic ideologies that exist in a time that looks nothing like ours. And so I just wanted to present an alternative that takes the best things of everything. I don't know how much I took from capitalism, if anything, but it's a bit hard to explain. Like, people should just buy the book. It's just $32.95 on, I don't know, Booktopia order. But essentially it's just this idea of changing our economy to benefit, to focus on people rather than profit. That obviously, like, people will say that's communist or socialist idea, but just thinking about the way, I think that a lot of people are scared of communism and socialism because they think that that's going to get in the way of business and entrepreneurialism and innovation. And I think that those things, as a former business owner and, B&T 30 under 30 entrepreneur nominee, didn't win.
Oh,
it's a raw that thing, but you just pay to be in it. Anyway, that's capitalism, baby.
This is another chapter in the book about how you ripped off in that award ceremony and how you're still bitter about it. Yeah.
Again, I think the left needs to be better at explaining like that we still believe in commerce, we still believe in innovation, we still believe in like building businesses, but it's just about sharing that like around, and not necessarily just with workers, but with community. I talk about like having anchor institutions like hospitals and customer-owned banks and things that kind of can be like center points for jobs and capital. And I don't know, read the book, but basically it's just this idea of like, let's.
Well, I can quote your words back here if this helps. The goal is an economy that puts people at the center, focusing on equality and equity, and operates within our ecological bounds. And yes, you put more meat on the bones there. You're talking about public ownership, regulation, worker ownership of firms, universal basic income, universal housing. And yes, widespread regulation. I mean, yes, I think it's important. And this was a light bulb moment for me. It's like capitalism isn't markets. Like there's a thing called market socialism, and you can still have markets operating under a social democratic or socialist economy. Yes, capitalism is much more about the private ownership of the means of production. That's the real sticking point that drives people crazy. We could still have a broadly socialist or at least radically social democratic society in which you still had, some private businesses, cafes, and there's not a huge interest or priority, at least, of taking over those kind of, smaller businesses that people are running for basic profit. That's not so much a problem, provided the workers are treated equitably and ideally in a kind of co-op version. Co-op arrangement. But yes, I mean, I read this description, and to me, it does sort of seem like an eco-socialist vision, which is sort of the ideology I think Emerald and I would subscribe to, and you're seeing a lot out of the democratic socialist movement in within the Greens and also across America. I mean, I don't know. I guess people don't like labels all the time. For me, it was really clarifying to arrive at a label and to find out more about what democratic socialism actually means and what that might actually look like in Australia. But it seems to me like, you're not necessarily happy to sign up to that or put that label on yourself.
I mean, no, I would probably describe myself as a socialist because that's just what and like your eco-socialist, as you say, like I think that I do. Like I'm very much aligned with you and Emerald in your views of the world and how systems and economies can work. I think that something that I worked for 9 months at Teachers Consent on like a national consent campaign for 16 to 25-year-olds. Is a little bit of a tangent, but a lot of the research that we came back, like obviously we need to get a lot more young men engaged in the conversations around consent. They're the ones that are most likely to commit sexual assault, and therefore we need to like involve them in conversation. They felt very much like they weren't allowed to be part of the conversation, or they felt turned off by terms like toxic masculinity or patriarchy and stuff. And I think people that are like studied and learned in patriarchy and understanding what toxic masculinity is, that it means like there's a certain type of masculinity. It's not all masculinity is toxic. We've lost a lot of those battles in terms of defining stuff. And the right is really good at taking these terms. They've turned social justice warrior into like an insult. Like they've turned everything into an insult. So I still ebb and flow between these two things. I just think that we need to be better at selling the ideas, explaining what patriarchy is and how it harms men too, rather than being like patriarchy, men control everything and you suck. Kind of that's how young people are perceiving these conversations. And so the same thing goes with like socialism and communism. It's been turned into an insult, and basically, people that are kind of shilling for free market neoliberal capitalism will always just say anything that gives anyone a little bit of help is socialism or communism, and therefore we should disregard it. But like ultimately we need to build coalitions that are a majority of people that believe in these things. And so I think that there's a method to the madness of potentially not getting sucked into these label discussions. Maybe it's fine and clarifying to define yourself as that. But I think that we need to be better at selling the ideas, and that's what I'm trying to do. I think that's what you guys do well at the podcast as well, is like actually explaining what it means and how it benefits people, including people on the right that may want to use these labels.
Which I think, Bernie Sanders is, again, we could have lots of critiques of Bernie's, particularly recently on the question of Israel, but for a long time, still a huge amount of respect for him and the mass movement that he built. And I guess the example of him is like, yes, I'm a democratic socialist, but hey, let's talk about workers' rights. Let's talk about what that means. This is why I believe in this stuff. And it wasn't foregrounding it. He wasn't saying Bernie Sanders, democratic socialist, vote for me, but he didn't shirk away from that label, I suppose, and sort of seek to explain, this is what I believe in. And this is why, this is the enemy. The enemy is this economic system that rips you off and concentrates wealth in the hands of a tiny few. That's the thing that I'm against. So if you're against that, then join me. And if you don't call yourself a democratic socialist, I don't care. But here's what, if we're all fighting for the same thing, I think that's fair enough. Now, my concern, though, is while I certainly have a lot of respect for a bunch of the independents who are in Parliament, and I'm very happy to see Liberals lose their seats, and I'm sure there's a number of things that me and someone like David Pocock, for example, agree on, I don't necessarily see them as a threat to neoliberal capitalism. And I think that the lack of class politics that we find in the teal movement to be a real big drawback. And when people, and the teals are very big about rejecting ideology and don't put a label on me, yada, yada, yada. And then you sort of get along to this point and you go, oh, okay, we agree on climate change action, but you still are pretty big on cutting taxes for the wealth. You don't want to introduce wealth taxes. And you're a little dodgy when it comes to workers' rights and unions. I don't know. Am I being unfair?
No, I think that they exist because they're needed in those seats. I think like they do have a place in our political future. I think an important place in the political future, because I think ultimately we're not going to like be able to win over, the rich inner city suburbs, although they all do like believe in climate change. And I think that a lot of people go like tell the Greens to get back to just talking about climate and stuff. I think that more people understand the value of like minority governments and how our political system actually works is good. And I think ultimately it helps our movement to show that we can actually get to a place of governing. And that's what I talked to Max about in the book, obviously before he lost his seat. And I think that he, in a lot of ways, like his campaign to win his seat in the first place was a testament to this idea of like being community focused and being electorate focused and really like door knocking and exciting the community. That's a thing that's good for politics. So while I do think that a lot of the independents are still neoliberals, or maybe they'll start defining themselves as like this abundance mindset or whatever from Ezra Klein, which now Chalmers is obsessed with.
Yes, they're all obsessed with fucking abundance.
And I think we all like the word abundance. It sounds pretty good. I mean, abundance of what is the other thing. So, yeah, I think they have a good, important place in Australian politics in seats that the Greens at this stage have no chance of winning, and therefore just reducing the power of Labor and the coalition, I think at this point is pretty good.
I'll take it. On climate, I mean, again, I know this is, yes, you're obviously very passionate about it, as we all are, about the climate crisis and what to be done. And I must say, on the topic of hope punk, you are detailing a whole bunch of things that are happening or that could happen or that could expand, that could seriously, tackle the climate crisis. Again, a whole bunch of warming and changes is kind of baked in at this point, but there's still a lot that can be done and should be done. You have a great moment busting the Australia is too small to matter argument, which we still see being played out in our fucking national conversation, which is remarkable. Mm-hmm. Again, people might be familiar with these stats, but you say Australia is 0.3% of the world's population, but if you include exports, we make up 5% of global emissions. And this was amazing. If every country emitted at the same per capita rate as Australia, global emissions would be nearly 4 times higher than they are today. Which I thought is so great. It's just like, don't look at our behavior or try and mimic us. You just keep being a poor country and not doing stuff, and we'll keep shirking our responsibility. Seems to be the general vibe.
And I also write about the fact that like we also outsource a lot of our emissions. Like when we are manufacturing so much stuff in China or in other nations in the global south, we are effectively outsourcing our manufacturing emissions to them, and then we're blaming them. We're blaming them. So something like 13, I think it's about 13% of China's annual emissions come from like Western quote unquote nations in the manufacturing sector. So it just doesn't help doesn't help the world to say that, it's kind of over the problems over there when we are absolutely kind of overdogs, as I write in the book, rather than underdogs on this thing. We are on the podium, and we therefore have a really great opportunity to change the way that the resource economy works globally, because we have a really big slice of that, and in terms of gas exports and stuff. So again, there's a lot of opportunity in that.
Yeah.
If we actually just really believe in the fact that we have power, rather than just being like, oh no, it's all too hard, or no, we're too small, it doesn't matter. Coming back to this idea that we've been hearing from the government saying that we have no power in the Middle East, but then, apparently Iran cares to firebomb synagogues here in Australia. So it's like, no, actually we are a global player and we should act like one and take other countries along on a more prosperous, abundant view of the future.
Yeah, what's abundant? The fucking sun. It's like abundant as hell. So I was reading this climate chapter all in the context of the sort of stuff that's ticking along in the news this week. I mean, we've got the upcoming setting of 2035 emission reduction targets by Labor. That's all being kept very close to the chest, it seems. It's very hard to see exactly what's going on there. Meanwhile, Barnaby Joyce is trying to tear the coalition apart, along with Matt Canavan, seriously trying to split the coalition's commitment to net zero by 2050. How are you seeing all that playing out? And can you fucking believe that we are still fucking doing this in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, when Albo and Labor won the election last cycle, I definitely felt like, oh, yes, finally there are people in charge that actually at least believe that climate change is a real and present danger to us. And then have seen very little evidence to suggest that they want to do anything about that. They're like, I think almost in some ways it's worse to be like,
they're the worst ones. Yeah. It is happening, but we can't be fucked doing anything about it. Yeah.
I mean, I obviously hated this. I mean, Labor obviously being very cynical in allowing Barnaby Joyce to take up so much time to even it's a private members bill or whatever that he's brought forward. So it's just, they obviously there's political wins here for them to be like, well, you're saying that climate change isn't real, even though most Australians now supposedly believe it is. I'm not sure that that's actually true. I think there's still a lot of people that remain unconvinced. There's some research out of France that did a global study. It's a pretty high percentage of Australians that don't believe that climate change is a thing, or they don't believe it's human caused.
Right. We've certainly been leading the world in terms of climate change denial for a long period of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is also political wins for Barnaby here, right? And so as a increasingly irrelevant and smaller kind of opposition, why wouldn't they throw shit at the wall like this? Why wouldn't they be provocative and say these things? Because then the media laps it up, and then Labor lets them take up fucking question time with these kind of questions around it.
Yeah.
While they're hiding these environmental reports, while they're approving fossil fuel projects out to 2070, and while the Great Barrier Reef is bleaching and there's the algal blooms and who knows what, the next couple of years of summer bushfires will look like in Europe and America, they're having record temperatures. And so to answer your question, I fucking hate what's happening. I think that was the question, is how do I feel about it?
Yeah. But hope, we're gonna have the hope in there. Yeah. No, I think it's yes, that's important. I mean, I don't know, it won't surprise people to think that I have lost all faith in the Labor Party as an institution, as a political organisation, to seriously grapple with and take the action that it needs to take in order to address the climate crisis. I'm sorry, I just the Climate Council shared that new 21-year-old South Australian senator got elected, whose name escapes me. I'm sorry, but Chloe Walker, maybe. Anyway, giving a speech in Parliament about how, in 2050, she's going to be in her mid-40s and she's young, and old people in this Parliament like Barnaby Joyce deny climate change and it's a disgrace. And the Climate Council shared it being like, go off, Senator. And it's like, yeah, but she is representing a party that just approved this massive carbon bomb. You have to know that. And so the cognitive dissonance is too much. The contradiction is too clear. And I don't know, anyone who cares about this, you got to stop being a member of and voting for the Labor Party. And you have to tell them that the political cost of their climate denialism and lack of action is the fact they're going to lose votes.
Yeah, and I think that's the silver lining in this, right? Is that I think that a lot of Labor members are a lot more closely aligned to us than what the top end of Labor are kind of doing and saying in their policies. So ultimately that's not a sustainable thing for the Labor Party to continuously go against the member base and the science and the economics. So it can only, I feel like I hold on to this hope that it's kind of this last little whimper before we move on with it and we like start actually taking the challenges and the opportunities seriously. Because I tried to get an interview with Chris Bowen. He did the whole thing about like protest, don't do anything, like just come and talk to me. Well, I reached out and Charlie reached out, not being able to get a meeting. It's like, well, why won't you meet with us to talk about this stuff? It's because they keep contravening the science. So
yeah, don't avoid those awkward questions. All right, finishing up, I mean, yes, you do end with this very hopeful conclusion where you do sort of paint a picture of the brighter future where the better things are possible and are realised in 2050, Australian 2050. And yes, there are lots of very nice things that I would very much like to see in that future of 2050, which, as we've said, having a hopeful vision of the future is crucial, and needing able to believe that it's winnable and that's doable is step number one, perhaps, before significantly changing the world. You do right. The Australian Parliament is now a beacon of diversity. This is in 2050, with a substantial increase in independents and minor parties. The once dominant major parties have dwindled and now match the size of former minor parties. Supply of confidence motions and coalition deals are the necessary conditions for forming a government. When he talked to Max, he talked about a Greens government in 30 years. So is there a Greens government in 2050? Can you confirm?
Well, I think the path to a Greens government is to have a minority government. I don't necessarily believe in majority governments. I don't think, because they don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And their interest is maintaining power, not providing for the nation, really. I think that through compromise, and not in the centrist idea of compromise, not in the Labor's current idea of compromise, which is you do what we say and we don't like what's happened in Tasmania. Yeah. I think that ultimately the Greens' path to government is through a minority government working with a diverse array of independents that represent different communities. I think that's realistically, in the time that we have to 2050, the most likely outcome for the Greens. Yeah, I don't believe in majority governments. I don't think that they've been proven to actually serve the nation in the way that minority governments have been proven to actually have some good policies that reduced our emissions for a time being, So
yeah, I think that's certainly true, particularly in the age in which the major parties are winning primary votes in the low 30s and are still getting these massive majority governments. Yeah, I think in the past you could look to examples in which, the vast majority of Australians voted for one of the two major parties when the major parties more closely represented the class interests of workers versus capital. You sort of had a much more of a democratic outcome in those respects. But yes, these days in which Labor can get 34% of the vote and get 93 seats out of 151, it's bonkers. Yeah. And long live the minority cooperation and compromise to deliver a better 2050.
And that's the thing, right? They have such a convincing amount of seats in Parliament. They could hemorrhage a lot of seats at the next election by doing some really big things. But in that time, people's lives will improve. We'll see emissions come down. We'll see cost of living get better or whatever. And they could be really well loved by much more than 33% of the country or whatever it is. But they're not going to do
doing big things
that,
might win them votes. This is the other thing. Is the idea that doing anything big or left wing will inevitably cost you votes. It's just coming from left wing people drives me crazy too. It's you think it's a good idea. It seems that all you don't have faith in is your political party's ability to communicate these ideas and explain to people why taxing the rich to better fund public services will be good for everyone, why taking serious action to take away the power of wealthy investors will be better for ordinary people to address the housing crisis. Yes, you've got to believe that these better things are possible and sellable. Otherwise, why do you believe in them?
They are. When you tangibly improve people's lives, they can feel it and they go, wow, this did make sense. I think that for all of the time, they spend so much time bashing the Greens, so much time because they're scared of being outflanked by the Greens. You could just adopt Greens policies and the Greens would no longer exist. You know, if there was a Labor that brought to the election a lot of Greens policies, it would be hard not to vote for them because you've adopted these things. Ultimately that's the idea. I think that's why I try to sit above, even though I would say loyal to the Greens and consistently preference the Greens because they offer the most sensible and the policies that will actually tangibly improve our lives and the survival of our planet. and I don't see
use
Labor
that clip. Cut
doing
that clip. We'll use that. That's good.
The labelings, come back to the labels and the sports teams and stuff. Ultimately, what I am attracted to is good policy, and that tangibly improve the lives of people. And so if you offer good policy that tangibly improve the lives of people, then that you will get my vote. And I think that should be the way anyone approaches politics, regardless of party politic and regardless of, how much we all individually benefit from that. I think we should be all thinking much more at a community and a national level about how the quality of life is improving. But unfortunately, the three major parties, because it's a coalition, don't offer really much for the improvement of the majority of our lives. So
they're not interested in delivering us an economy.
No, definitely not.
It's fun to say. The book is Better Things Are Possible, How Rebellious Hope Will Change the World by Jack Toohey. Tell us all the details, friend. When is it out? Where can people get it? And if people want to see you talking about it live, where can they go?
So it's out September 2. So when you're listening to this, just a day away. I know there's two sleeps. I know you can't wait. And then I will be doing a book launch in Balmain at Red Mill Rum with Grace Tame on Thursday the 4th. There's still tickets available for that, but they're selling like hotcakes.
Cool.
And I'm making massive amounts of profit, which I'll then redistribute. So yeah, you can come on to that. There'll be a few more events popping up over the next kind of little while, depending if anyone actually buys the book and the media care about it or not. So we'll see how we go.
Well, good luck with it, man. Congrats on the book, and thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Serious danger to Australia.